Some people say fate doesn't exist, that every moment is just chance, random as snowflakes landing on asphalt. But on a frozen Colorado mountain road, when Lucas Reed's headlights caught the silhouette of a woman standing beside a disabled luxury sedan, fate wasn't asking permission. It was collecting a debt 15 years overdue. He had no idea that the stranger he was about to help was the woman who had haunted his dreams for over a decade, the one he'd saved once before, the one he'd loved in silence, the one he'd lost forever. Or so he thought. Because Victoria Hale was about to walk back into his life, and this time neither of them would walk away unchanged. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and let me know where this story is reaching you. Hit that like button and stay with me until the end, because what happens next will restore your faith in second chances. The wind came down from the Rockies like a living thing, sharp and hungry, stripping warmth from everything it touched. Lucas Reed drove his aging pickup truck along Highway 285 with the careful attention of a man who knew these roads could turn deadly without warning. The March evening had swallowed the sun an hour ago, leaving only the tunnel of his headlights cutting through darkness that seemed to press against the windows. His daughter's backpack sat in the passenger seat, forgotten during the morning rush. Maya had called from her friend Emma's house, unconcerned. She had everything she needed for her sleepover. But Lucas had made the promise anyway, the same promise he made every time. He'd drop it off in the morning, first thing. Promises mattered. They were the scaffolding that held his world together. The road climbed steadily, flanked by pine forests so dense they looked like solid walls of shadow. Lucas's hands rested easy on the wheel, his mind half on the transmission job waiting in his garage, half on whether Maya had remembered to pack her inhaler. She'd been good about it lately, but she was 8, old enough to be responsible, young enough to forget. That's when he saw the lights. Not headlights, hazards. The rhythmic pulse of amber warning flashers up ahead, off to the side of the road where the shoulder widened into a scenic pullout. Lucas's foot eased off the accelerator automatically. Mountain highways were unforgiving, and leaving someone stranded up here after dark was something close to criminal. As he drew closer, the vehicle took shape in his high beams. A black Mercedes sedan, sleek and expensive, looking wildly out of place against the rough stone and weathered guardrail. The kind of car that cost more than he'd earned in the past 3 years combined. A figure stood beside it. A woman, alone, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Lucas pulled in behind the Mercedes, leaving his headlights on to illuminate the scene, and stepped out into the wind. It hit him immediately, driving through his flannel shirt like he was wearing nothing at all. The temperature had dropped fast after sunset. Up here, that could mean trouble. "Evening," he called out, keeping his distance, keeping his voice friendly but not invasive. "Looks like you could use some help." The woman turned toward him, and even in the harsh wash of headlights, Lucas could see she wasn't dressed for a mountain emergency. Designer coat, heels better suited to boardroom floors than roadside gravel, no hat or gloves. She looked cold enough that her words came out unsteady. "Thank you for stopping. The car it died. Everything shut off at once." Lucas approached the Mercedes, pulling a small flashlight from his jacket pocket. "Mind if I take a look?" "Please." She stepped aside, relief evident in her voice. "I've been here almost 40 minutes. My phone barely has signal." He popped the hood, she'd already released it from inside, and bent to examine the engine. The Mercedes was immaculate, probably serviced at dealerships where they served espresso while you waited. But even expensive machines failed, and Lucas had learned a long time ago that complexity was just simplicity with more parts to break. "How far were you planning to drive tonight?" he asked, his flashlight beam tracking across hoses and connections. "Denver. I have a meeting first thing in the morning." "Long drive from here. You've got about 90 miles to go." His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking battery terminals, looking for obvious disconnections. Were there any warning lights before it quit? None. It was running perfectly, and then it just wasn't. Lucas grunted softly, recognition dawning. He traced a particular cable, found the connection point, and there it was. A battery terminal worked loose by vibration and mountain roads, just barely disconnected. Simple. Fixable. He pulled a multi-tool from his pocket, tightened the connection with a few quick turns, and straightened. "Try starting it now." She slid into the driver's seat. Lucas noticed she moved with a kind of controlled grace, despite the cold and the stress, and turned the key. The Mercedes purred to life immediately, dashboard lights glowing like a constellation. The relief on her face was genuine as she stepped back out. What was it? Battery terminal came loose, not uncommon on these roads. Lots of vibration, lots of temperature changes. It's secure now, but you should have it checked when you get to Denver. Make sure there's nothing else wearing down. I will, thank you so much. What do I owe you? Lucas was already closing the hood, already turning back toward his truck. Nothing, just drive safe. Wait, please, let me give you something for your time. You probably had somewhere to be. Nowhere that can't wait. He offered her a brief smile, the kind that was polite but final. You're all set. Watch for ice patches the next 20 miles. Temperature's dropping fast. At least tell me your name, she pressed. I'd like to know who helped me. There was something in her voice, not just gratitude, but a kind of intensity Lucas couldn't quite place. He paused with his hand on his truck's door handle, caught by the strange earnestness in her request. Lucas Reed. I run a garage in Pinewood, about 15 miles back down the mountain. Lucas. She repeated his name like she was committing it to memory. Thank you, Lucas. Truly. He nodded, uncomfortable with the weight of her attention, and climbed into his truck. Through his rear-view mirror, as he pulled back onto the highway, he saw her standing there, illuminated by her own headlights, watching him drive away. Something about the moment felt strange, significant. But Lucas had learned not to trust those feelings. Significance was usually just coincidence wearing a fancy coat. He turned his attention back to the road and headed home. Victoria Hale stood in the cold long after the red taillights had vanished around a curve, her heart pounding with a recognition so powerful it felt like physical pain. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. But his face, older, weathered by time and hardship, marked by a grief she recognized even if she didn't know its source, was exactly the face she'd been searching for in crowds for 15 years. The face she'd tried to find on social media, through mutual friends, through every resource available to someone with her wealth and connections. Lucas Reed. The name was different. Or maybe she'd never known his real name at all. That night, they hadn't exactly exchanged biographical details. She'd been 22, a graduate student working late in the university library. He'd been there too, another student she'd seen around campus but never spoken to. Quiet, watchful. The kind of person who seemed to take up less space than they actually occupied. When three men had followed her from the library to the parking lot, when their intentions had become horrifyingly clear, Lucas had appeared out of nowhere. He hadn't asked questions, hadn't hesitated. He'd put himself between Victoria and violence without a second thought. And when it was over, when campus security had arrived and statements had been taken and she'd turned to thank him properly, he was gone. She'd tried to find him afterward, searched for weeks, but he'd disappeared from campus entirely, as if he'd never existed. Eventually, Victoria had forced herself to move on, though she'd never forgotten. How could she? He'd saved more than her safety that night. He'd saved her sense of self, her ability to walk through the world without fear. And now, 15 years later, on a dark mountain highway, he'd helped her again, and once again vanished before she could even thank him properly. But this time was different. This time, she had a name, a location. Victoria pulled out her phone with shaking hands and opened a search browser, typing quickly despite the cold numbing her fingers. Pinewood, Colorado, Lucas Reed, garage. The signal was weak but functional. Results loaded slowly. Reed's Automotive Repair, a small shop on Main Street. Reviews praising honest work and fair prices. A few photos showing a modest building with a single garage bay and a hand-painted sign. She clicked on images, searching for a photo of the owner, and found one, a local newspaper article about a charity car show from 2 years ago. Lucas stood beside a restored pickup truck, a small girl perched on his shoulders, both of them grinning at something off-camera. The caption identified them. Lucas Reed and daughter Maya at the annual Pinewood Community Fundraiser. Daughter. Victoria's throat tightened. Of course he had a life. 15 years was a long time. He'd moved on, built something, became someone. She had no claim on him, no right to whatever she was feeling. But God, The way her heart had jumped when she'd recognized him. The way every carefully constructed wall she'd built around her memories had crumbled the instant she'd heard his voice. She needed to think about this rationally. She was Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, a woman who'd built a fortune through careful planning and strategic thinking. She didn't chase ghosts. She didn't make impulsive decisions based on emotion, except she was already getting back into her Mercedes, already turning the car around, already heading toward Pinewood instead of Denver, toward answers instead of away from them. Because some debts couldn't be repaid with money, and some questions wouldn't wait another 15 years. Lucas's garage sat dark and silent when he pulled up just past 8 o'clock. The building was simple, cinder block and corrugated metal, a large roll-up door facing the street, a smaller entrance on the side. A wooden sign hung above the main door, hand-carved and weathered. Reed's Automotive Repair. Honest work. Fair prices. He'd bought the property 6 years ago, when Claire had still been alive, when they'd still believed in futures and plans. She'd helped him paint the office, had insisted on the flower boxes beneath the front windows, even though Lucas had argued they'd be a pain to maintain. He still planted flowers in them every spring, kept them watered, pulled the weeds. Some promises outlasted the people you made them to. The house sat 50 yards behind the garage, a small 2-bedroom cabin that had needed work when they'd bought it and still needed work now. But it was theirs. His and Maya's. It was home. Inside, warmth and light spilled from the windows. Lucas could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Maya's friend Emma's mother Sarah, dropping her off for the sleepover. He grabbed his daughter's backpack and headed inside. "Dad!" Maya launched herself at him the moment he walked through the door, all 70 pounds of pure kinetic energy. "Did you bring it?" "Right here." He held up the backpack, weathering her enthusiastic hug with practiced stability. "Everything you need for your secret spy mission." "It's not a spy mission," Maya informed him seriously, though her eyes sparkled with mischief. "It's a research expedition into the nature of friendship and the optimal ratio of popcorn to movie duration." Lucas fought back a smile. His daughter had her mother's way with words, turning simple concepts into elaborate constructions just for the joy of it. "Sounds scientific." "Very scientific." Emma appeared from the hallway, already in pajamas decorated with cartoon cats. "We have hypotheses and everything." Sarah Patterson, Emma's mother, and one of the few people in Pinewood who'd become a genuine friend rather than just a neighbor, stood in the kitchen doorway with a knowing smile. "I'll have them back by noon tomorrow. Try not to worry too much." "I never worry," Lucas lied. "Of course not. That's why you texted me 3 times today asking if Maya needed anything." "Twice," Lucas corrected. The third text was about something completely different. It was about whether she remembered her inhaler. "See? Completely different." Maya rolled her eyes with the exaggerated patience of a child who'd had this conversation before. "Dad, I'm fine. We're fine. Go do boring adult things and stop hovering." "Boring adult things," Lucas repeated. "Right, I'll try to find some." He kissed the top of Maya's head, accepted another brief hug, and watched as the 3 of them headed out to Sarah's car, his daughter chattering excitedly about their evening plans, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The house felt immediately larger and quieter once they'd gone. Lucas stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable disorder of their life. Maya's drawings covering the refrigerator, homework papers scattered across the table, a pair of sneakers abandoned by the door. The silence pressed in, not quite comfortable, not quite lonely. Just empty in that specific way that happened when Maya was away, and there was nothing to distract him from his thoughts. He should eat something. Should probably do the dishes piled in the sink, should definitely not think about the woman on the highway, or the strange way she'd looked at him, or the odd feeling of recognition that had brushed against him when she'd said his name. Instead, he found himself pulling out his laptop, an outdated machine that took 3 tries to boot up, and opening a browser. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was stupid. She was nobody. A stranded motorist he'd helped. That was all. But he typed the search anyway. Victoria Hale, Denver. The results loaded slowly, and when they did, Lucas felt something cold settle in his chest. Victoria Hale wasn't just somebody. She was somebody. CEO of Hale Industries, one of the largest commercial real estate development firms in the Western states. Forbes profile. Wall Street Journal interviews. Professional photographs showing a woman in power suits and boardrooms, commanding respect with the kind of effortless authority that came from being genuinely competent. He clicked through articles, each one adding another layer to the picture. She'd built her company from almost nothing, started with a single property renovation, and turned it into an empire. She sat on boards, advised politicians, spoke at conferences. She was successful in a way that existed in an entirely different universe from Lucas's world of oil changes and brake repairs. And something about her face, even in these professional photos, polished and remote, tugged at something in his memory. Something old and buried deep. He'd met her before. Not tonight. Before tonight. The realization came slowly, like something surfacing from deep water. College. The university. He'd only been there 1 year, one disastrous, financial aid-dependent year before everything had fallen apart and he'd been forced to leave. But during that year, there'd been a night. A parking lot. A woman who'd needed help. Lucas's hand stilled on the mouse. No, it couldn't be. But the more he looked at Victoria Hale's photograph, the more certain he became. 15 years had changed her. Added sophistication, confidence, the armor of success, but the bone structure was the same. The eyes were the same. She was the woman he'd helped that night outside the library. The woman he'd protected from 3 drunk fraternity brothers who'd thought money and privilege made them untouchable. The woman whose name he'd never learned because campus security had arrived and he'd left, disappeared. Because that same week he'd received the call about his mother's illness and financial aid had informed him his funding was under review due to missed payments, and the careful house of cards he'd been building to escape poverty had collapsed all at once. Lucas had left campus without a word to anyone, had gone home to take care of his dying mother, and had never gone back. And now, 15 years later, on a random mountain highway, he'd helped her again. The coincidence was staggering, almost unbelievable, except Victoria Hale had looked at him like she'd recognized him, had asked for his name like it mattered, had stood in the freezing cold watching his taillights disappear like she was trying to memorize the sight. She'd known who he was. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Victoria sat in her Mercedes in the parking lot of Pinewood's only hotel, a modest establishment called the Mountain View Inn that probably hadn't been renovated since the 1990s, and tried to figure out what the hell she was doing. She'd driven straight through to this tiny mountain town instead of going home, had checked into a hotel without luggage, without a plan, without anything resembling a rational explanation for her behavior. The desk clerk had been polite enough not to comment on her designer clothes or expensive car or obvious lack of preparation. Now, at almost 10 o'clock at night, Victoria sat in the dark parking lot and tried to organize her thoughts into something resembling coherence. She'd found Lucas Reed, the man who'd saved her 15 years ago, who'd vanished without a trace, who she'd tried and failed to find through every means at her disposal. He was here, real, alive, living a quiet life in a small town, raising a daughter, fixing cars. The question was, what did she want from him? Closure, maybe. A chance to properly thank him for what he'd done all those years ago. An explanation for why he'd disappeared so completely. Or maybe, and this was the part that scared her, she wanted to know if the connection she'd felt that night was real or just a trauma bond built on adrenaline and fear. Victoria had built her entire adult life on careful control. She didn't do impulsive, she didn't chase feelings. She certainly didn't rearrange her schedule and drive into the mountains on the slim chance of, what, romance? Reconciliation with a man she'd known for maybe 20 minutes total across 15 years? Her phone buzzed. Marcus, her CFO, wondering where she was and why she'd missed the evening conference call. Victoria stared at the message, her finger hovering over the reply button. She should go back to Denver, should apologize to her team, reschedule the meeting, focus on the acquisition deal that needed her attention. Should be the person she'd worked so hard to become, professional, focused, reliable. But instead, she turned off her phone and went inside to her room. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she would figure out what came next. Tomorrow she would decide if second chances were real or just another fairy tale people told themselves to make random coincidence feel like destiny. Lucas didn't sleep well. He never slept well when Maya was gone. The house felt wrong without her presence, too quiet and too large. But tonight was worse than usual, his mind cycling through the same questions on repeat. Why had Victoria Hale been on that highway? Where had she been coming from? And why? This was the question that kept him awake past midnight. Why had she looked at him like that? He finally gave up on sleep around 5 in the morning, made coffee, and headed out to the garage. Work helped. Work always helped. The Subaru waiting in Bay 1 had a transmission problem that required complete focus, the kind of mechanical puzzle that would occupy his hands and quiet his mind. He was elbow deep in the engine compartment when he heard tires on gravel. Lucas straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, expecting an early customer. The garage wasn't officially open yet, wouldn't be for another 2 hours. But people in Pinewood knew he'd usually help out if you caught him working. The black Mercedes that pulled into the lot made his breath stop. Victoria Hale stepped out of the car wearing different clothes than last night. Designer jeans, a soft sweater, expensive boots, but the same expression of determined purpose. She crossed the gravel with long, confident strides, and when she stopped a few feet from where Lucas stood frozen, she said the words that changed everything. "You don't remember me, do you?" Lucas's mind raced, connecting dots, seeing the pattern finally become clear. The library, 15 years ago, the parking lot. Relief flooded her expression. Yes, that's right. I didn't..." He struggled to find words. "I didn't know your name. You never told me your name." "You didn't tell me yours either. You just disappeared. I looked for you. I looked for weeks. I had to leave, family emergency. I never went back to school." They stood there in the early morning light, the weight of 15 years and unanswered questions hanging between them like fog. "I wanted to thank you," Victoria said finally. "I've wanted to thank you for 15 years. What you did that night, those men, they would have..." Her voice caught. "You saved me. And I never got to tell you that." Lucas felt something shift in his chest, something he'd kept carefully locked away. "You don't owe me anything. That's not how debt works." She took a step closer. "At least, not the debts that matter." "Why are you really here?" The question came out rougher than he'd intended. "You're a CEO. You run a major company. You don't drive to small mountain towns to thank random people for 15-year-old favors." Victoria's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or respect for his directness. "You're right. I don't." She met his eyes without flinching. "I'm here because when I saw you last night, everything I've spent 15 years trying to forget came back all at once. I'm here because I need to know if what I felt that night was real, or just fear making a stranger into a hero. And if it was just fear, then I'll thank you properly, apologize for the intrusion, and go back to Denver. But if it wasn't..." She paused, vulnerable in a way that seemed foreign to her carefully controlled exterior. "If it wasn't, then I need to know that too." Lucas should have sent her away, should have been practical and realistic and acknowledged that whatever she thought she felt was just a fantasy built on incomplete information. His life was here, stable, simple, focused on Maya and work and getting through each day. He didn't have room for complications, especially not complications wearing designer clothes and asking questions that didn't have easy answers. But looking at Victoria Hale in the morning light, seeing the genuine uncertainty beneath her confidence, Lucas found himself saying, "I'm making breakfast. You hungry?" The smile that broke across her face was worth every complication that was about to follow. "Starving," Victoria said, and just like that, 15 years of separation ended. What came next? Whether it would be closure or something more, whether the past could become a foundation for the future or just a beautiful dead end, neither of them knew. But they were about to find out. Lucas led her toward the house, his mind already racing ahead to the dozen reasons this was a terrible idea, even as his heart insisted it might be the best decision he'd made in years. Behind them, the sun broke over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. And in a small town in Colorado, where everyone knew everyone and secrets were hard currency, Lucas Reed invited Victoria Hale into his home and into his life, without any idea how much would change before they figured out what came next. The kitchen was exactly what Victoria expected, and nothing like what she'd imagined. Clean but lived in, with dishes in the drying rack, and a child's artwork covering every available surface of the refrigerator. Crayon drawings of horses and rainbows, a watercolor painting of what might have been the mountains, a spelling test marked with a gold star, and the teacher's enthusiastic, "Excellent work, Maya." Lucas moved through the space with the easy efficiency of someone who'd cooked countless meals alone, pulling eggs from the refrigerator, bread from a wooden box on the counter. "Coffee?" he asked, already reaching for a mug. "Please." Victoria sat at the small wooden table, feeling absurdly out of place in her expensive clothes and carefully applied makeup. This kitchen had never seen someone like her, someone who ate breakfast in restaurants or had assistants pick up smoothies between meetings. This was a room built for different rhythms, simpler routines. Lucas poured coffee into a mug that said "World's Okayest Dad" in fading letters and set it in front of her. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and Victoria felt that same electric jolt of recognition she'd experienced on the highway. "Cream or sugar?" "Black is fine." He nodded and turned back to the stove, cracking eggs into a pan with one hand. The domesticity of the moment felt surreal. Victoria Hale, who negotiated million-dollar deals and commanded boardrooms, sitting in a small-town kitchen watching a mechanic make scrambled eggs. "Your daughter," Victoria said, breaking the silence. "Maya. How old is she?" Lucas's entire demeanor changed at the mention of his daughter, softening, warming, becoming something more than just politely distant. 8. She's at a friend's house for a sleepover. The newspaper photo I found showed her sitting on your shoulders. She looked happy. He glanced back at her, spatula paused mid-stir. "You researched me." "I researched you," Victoria confirmed without apology. "After I realized who you were. I needed to know if I was chasing a ghost or a real person. And which one am I?" "I'm still figuring that out." Lucas plated the eggs, added toast, and brought both plates to the table. He sat across from her, and for a moment they just looked at each other, two people separated by 15 years and vastly different life experiences, connected by a single night that had shaped them both in ways they were only beginning to understand. "Tell me about that night," Lucas said finally. "What you remember." Victoria set down her fork, the food suddenly unimportant. "I remember being terrified. I'd stayed late at the library working on my thesis. It was almost midnight when I left. The parking lot was mostly empty, and I didn't think anything of it when I saw those 3 men near my car. I thought they were just other students. But they weren't. They were drunk and angry about something. I never found out what. They started following me, making comments. When I tried to get in my car, one of them blocked the door. That's when I realized how much trouble I was in." Lucas's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "You came out of nowhere," Victoria continued, her voice steady despite the memories rising like dark water. "I didn't even see where you came from. You just stepped between me and them and told them to leave. They laughed at you, called you names. One of them tried to push you out of the way." "I remember," Lucas said quietly. "You put him on the ground so fast I barely saw you move. The other 2 backed off immediately. Campus security showed up. Someone must have called them. They took statements, asked questions. When I turned around to thank you, you were gone. Just gone. I tried to find you afterward, asked campus security, checked the student directory, even talked to people who'd been in the library that night. Nobody knew who you were. I wasn't really part of campus life. I worked nights, went to classes, kept to myself. I was only there on financial aid, and even that was falling apart." Lucas stared at his coffee. 3 days after that night, I got a call that my mother was sick, cancer. The financial aid office called the same week, said there'd been errors in my application, that I owed money I didn't have. Everything collapsed at once. "So you left?" "I left. Went home to take care of her. She died 6 months later. By then, going back to school seemed impossible. I got a job at a garage, learned the trade, met Claire." His voice softened on the name. "Got married. Had Maya. Built a life." Victoria heard what he didn't say. Heard the love and the loss and the grief still living in the spaces between his words. "Your wife. The newspaper article mentioned you'd lost her. 3 years ago, car accident, black ice on the highway." Lucas's hands tightened around his mug. One minute she was here, the next she was gone. Maya was 5, old enough to understand, too young to process it properly. I'm sorry. Me too. He looked up at her, and Victoria saw the walls in his expression, the careful barriers he'd built to protect himself and his daughter from more pain. That's my life. Simple. Quiet. Focused on getting through each day and making sure Maya grows up feeling loved and safe. It's not glamorous, but it's ours. The implication was clear. Victoria's world of corporate success and constant motion had no place in his carefully constructed stability. What about you? Lucas asked. How did a graduate student working late in the library become the CEO of a major development company? Victoria smiled without humor. By working harder than everyone else and refusing to fail. That night in the parking lot taught me something. That the world was dangerous and unpredictable, and the only way to be safe was to be powerful. So I got powerful. That's a lonely way to live, says the man who just described his entire existence as getting through each day. The words came out sharper than Victoria intended, but Lucas didn't flinch. Instead, he studied her with those calm, assessing eyes that seemed to see past her expensive clothes and professional armor, straight to the scared 22-year-old still living somewhere inside her. Fair point, he said finally. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the tension easing into something more comfortable. The eggs were good, simple but well-made, seasoned properly, cooked with care. Victoria realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had made her breakfast. Business lunches, working dinners, coffee grab between meetings, but actual breakfast made by someone who cared whether she enjoyed it? That belonged to a different life, one she'd left behind in her single-minded pursuit of success. Why did you really come here? Lucas asked, echoing his earlier question. Not the version you told me in the garage. The real reason. Victoria set down her fork and met his eyes directly. Because I've spent 15 years wondering what would have happened if you hadn't disappeared. If I'd found you the next day and taken you to dinner to say thank you. If we'd become friends, or more than friends, or at least gotten the chance to find out. That's a lot of hypotheticals. I know, I built an entire fantasy around someone I barely knew, and that's not fair to you or realistic about who we actually are. But when I saw you last night on that highway, it all came back. Not just the fear, but the feeling of safety when you stepped in. The certainty that you were someone worth knowing. I can't let that go without at least trying to find out if it was real. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. I'm not the person you remember. That college kid who played hero? He doesn't exist anymore. I'm a widowed father who runs a garage in a town where everyone knows everyone's business. I don't have adventures. I don't have dramatic rescues. I have a daughter who needs stability and a life that works because it's predictable. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. Aren't you? Because the woman sitting in my kitchen right now is Victoria Hale, CEO, millionaire, someone who lives in a completely different world. What exactly do you think happens here? We discover we're soulmates and you move to Pinewood? I pack up Maya and we move to Denver? Those aren't realistic options. Victoria felt the words like a slap, mostly because he was right. She'd driven here on impulse, chasing a feeling without thinking through the practical impossibilities. Their lives didn't intersect, couldn't intersect, not in any meaningful way. You're right, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come here expecting, I don't even know what I expected, closure maybe, or confirmation that what I felt was just trauma and time turning a stranger into a myth. And is it? Is it what? Just trauma and time? Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and sorrow in equal measure, at the calluses on his hands from years of honest work, at the way he held himself with quiet dignity despite a life that had clearly dealt him more than his share of pain. No, she admitted. It's not. Lucas exhaled slowly. This is a bad idea. Probably. I have responsibilities. A daughter who's already lost one parent and doesn't need me getting involved in something complicated and probably doomed. I understand. And you have a company to run, a life in Denver. You can't just put that on hold to, what? See if there's something here worth exploring? Actually, Victoria said carefully, I can. I've been CEO for 8 years. I have an excellent executive team. The company won't collapse if I take some time to figure out my own life for once. Victoria, I'm not asking for promises, Lucas. I'm not asking you to change your life or risk your daughter's happiness. I'm just asking for time. Let me stay in Pinewood for a while. Let us actually get to know each other as real people instead of memory and myth. And if it turns out there's nothing here, then I'll go back to Denver and we'll both have closure. But if there is something, then what? We're still two people whose lives don't fit together. Maybe they don't, Victoria agreed. Or maybe we find a way to make them fit, but we'll never know if we don't try. Lucas rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of pure frustration. This is insane. Completely insane, Victoria confirmed. I should tell you to leave. Should say thank you for the closure and goodbye and wish you well. But I'm not going to. He looked at her with an expression caught somewhere between resignation and hope. Maya comes home at noon. She's going to have questions about why there's a strange woman in our kitchen. And this is a small town. By tomorrow afternoon, everyone will know Victoria Hale is staying at the Mountain View Inn. By tomorrow evening, they'll all have theories about why. Let them theorize. Easy for you to say. You can leave whenever you want. I have to live here. Victoria leaned forward, her voice intense. Then tell me to go, right now. Tell me this is a mistake and you want me to leave, and I will. I'll drive back to Denver and you'll never hear from me again. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and risk. Lucas's coffee had gone cold. Victoria's breakfast sat half-eaten on her plate. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, painting the kitchen in shades of gold. I can't, Lucas said finally. I can't tell you to go because part of me, the part that's apparently still that college kid who didn't think twice before stepping in to help a stranger, wants to know too. Wants to find out if this feeling is real or just wishful thinking. Relief flooded through Victoria so powerfully she felt dizzy. So what do? We take it slow. You meet Maya, but as a friend, nothing more. You stay in town, we spend time together, we see what happens. But if at any point I feel like this is hurting my daughter or disrupting the life we've built, it stops. No arguments, no negotiations. It just stops. Agreed. And you need to be honest with me about your expectations. I can't be a project or a charity case or some kind of redemption story you're using to add meaning to your corporate success. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Victoria considered the question carefully, knowing that her answer mattered. It's a second chance. Not just for us, but for me. I've spent 15 years building a career and accumulating success, and somewhere along the way I forgot to build a life. I forgot what it feels like to connect with someone real, to have conversations that matter, to be more than just my job title. You remind me of that. You remind me of who I was before I turned ambition into armor. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was looking for cracks in her sincerity. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. Okay, we'll try, but slowly, carefully, with Maya's well-being as the absolute priority. Of course. And if this blows up in our faces, then we'll deal with it like adults and move on with our lives. Right, simple. Lucas laughed without humor. Nothing about this is going to be simple. Probably not, Victoria agreed. But the things worth having usually aren't. They finished breakfast in a silence that felt less awkward than contemplative, both of them processing what they'd just agreed to. Victoria helped with the dishes despite Lucas's protests, and when they were done, she checked her watch. I should go, let you prepare for Maya coming home, and I need to make some calls, do damage control with my office about missing yesterday's meetings. What are you going to tell them? The truth, that I'm taking some personal time to deal with something important. Lucas walked her to the door, and on the porch they stood in the morning sun looking at each other with a mixture of uncertainty and anticipation. Thank you for breakfast, Victoria said, and for being honest about your concerns. Thank you for understanding them. Lucas hesitated, then added, There's a community dinner at the church tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, potluck, local families, the kind of small-town thing that probably seems boring to someone used to five-star restaurants. But if you wanted to meet some people, see what Pinewood is actually like, you'd be welcome. Victoria felt something warm spread through her chest. an invitation. A small one, hedged with caution, but real. I'd like that. Fair warning, there will be questions, a lot of questions. I can handle questions. We'll see. But he was almost smiling when he said it. Victoria drove back to the hotel feeling lighter than she had in years, like some weight she'd been carrying without realizing it had finally been set down. This might be a mistake. Probably was a mistake. But it was her mistake to make, and for once she was choosing connection over control, possibility over certainty. Back at the Mountain View Inn, she opened her laptop and composed a careful email to her executive team explaining that she was taking a temporary leave of absence to address personal matters. She appointed Marcus as acting CEO with her full authority and promised to be available for emergencies but otherwise unreachable for routine decisions. The responses came quickly: surprise, concern, offers of support. Marcus called within minutes. "Victoria, what's going on? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Marcus. Better than fine, actually. I just need some time to figure some things out." "This isn't like you. You never take personal time." "I know. That's exactly the problem." She could hear the confusion in his silence. "Trust me on this. The company will be fine. You're more than capable of handling things for a while." "How long is a while?" "I don't know yet. A few weeks, maybe longer. I'll stay in touch, I promise." After she hung up, Victoria sat on the hotel bed staring at her phone, feeling the strangeness of what she'd just done. She'd built her entire adult identity around being indispensable, irreplaceable, always available. Walking away, even temporarily, felt like stepping off a cliff. But maybe that's exactly what she needed. Her phone rang again. This time her assistant, then her board chair, then 3 different department heads all wanting to know what was happening. Victoria answered each call with the same calm explanation: personal leave, temporary absence, full confidence in the team. By the time the call stopped, it was past noon. Victoria changed into more casual clothes, still expensive, but at least not quite so obviously out of place in a mountain town, and decided to explore Pinewood. The town was smaller than she'd expected, built along a single main street with the mountains rising dramatically on both sides. Most of the buildings looked original to the town's founding, probably late 1800s, weathered wood and old brick, lovingly maintained but clearly functional rather than decorative. There was a general store, a diner, a post office, a tiny library, and scattered among them the kinds of businesses that kept small communities running: a hardware store, a feed supply, a real estate office with sun-faded listings in the window. Reed's Automotive Repair sat at the far end of Main Street, the hand-carved sign visible from a distance. Victoria didn't approach. She'd already intruded enough for one day, but she found herself studying the building, imagining Lucas inside, working on someone's car with the same careful competence he'd shown fixing her Mercedes. "You must be Victoria Hale." Victoria turned to find a woman about her age standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, expression friendly but assessing. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "I am. And you are?" "Sarah Patterson. I'm Emma's mother. Emma is Maya's best friend. Also the town's unofficial welcome committee, gossip coordinator, and general busybody." She said it with a smile that took any sting out of the words. "Saw your car at the hotel. Mercedes like that stands out around here." "I imagine it does." "Lucas mentioned you this morning when he dropped off Maya's inhaler. Said you were an old friend passing through town." Victoria wondered exactly how much Lucas had revealed. "Something like that." "Uh-huh." Sarah's expression suggested she didn't believe the casual explanation for a second. "Look, I'm not trying to pry. Okay, I'm totally trying to pry, but I'm also trying to be helpful. Pinewood's a small town. People are going to talk. If you're planning to stick around, you might want to get ahead of that." "Get ahead of it how?" "Come to the community dinner tomorrow night. Let people meet you. Show them you're a real person, not just some mysterious stranger staying at the hotel and visiting Lucas at odd hours." Victoria couldn't help but laugh. News travels fast. "Faster than you'd think. Mrs. Henderson saw you at Lucas's house this morning. She lives next door and doesn't miss much. By lunch, half the town knew. By dinner, everyone will have a theory about who you are and what you want." "And what do they think I want?" Sarah's expression turned more serious. "Honestly, most people are worried. Lucas has been through hell. lost his wife, raised Maya alone, kept his head down and his heart locked up tight for 3 years. If someone's going to come into his life and shake things up, people want to make sure it's for the right reasons. I'm not here to hurt him. I believe you, but you're going to have to prove it to everyone else. Sarah softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think it's good for him. Having someone new in his life, I mean. He's been alone too long, too focused on just getting through. Maybe you'll remind him there's more to life than survival. That's assuming there's actually something between us. We barely know each other. Maybe. Or maybe you know each other better than you think. Sometimes the important connections happen fast. Sarah checked her watch. I need to get back. Promised Emma I'd make cookies for her and Maya this afternoon, but I meant what I said about the dinner tomorrow. Come, meet people. Let them see you're not a threat. Thank you. I will. Sarah started to walk away, then turned back. And Victoria? Be patient with Lucas. He's been hurt badly and he's got Maya to think about. He won't rush into anything, no matter what he feels. If you're serious about this, about him, you're going to have to prove you're willing to stay for the long haul. Victoria watched Sarah disappear into the general store, feeling the weight of the woman's words. She'd come to Pinewood chasing a feeling, acting on impulse for maybe the first time in her adult life. But impulses faded, feelings changed. If she wanted this, whatever this was, to become something real, she'd need more than just nostalgia and wishful thinking. She'd need patience, commitment, a willingness to be vulnerable in ways her corporate life had never required. The question was, could she do that? Could Victoria Hale, who'd built an empire on control and certainty, learn to embrace the uncertainty of actual human connection? Back at the hotel, she pulled out her laptop again and began researching Pinewood properly. Town history, school district information, local businesses, community events. If she was going to do this, she'd do it right. She'd understand Lucas's world before trying to fit herself into it, because Sarah Patterson was right about one thing. Lucas Reed had been hurt enough. If Victoria was going to be part of his life, she needed to be absolutely certain she was adding something meaningful, not just creating another loss he'd eventually have to survive. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Maya's home. Told her I met an old friend who might be in town for a while. She wants to know if you like horses. Victoria smiled and typed back. Love them. Why? Because she's going to judge your entire character based on your answer. Fair warning, she takes horses very seriously. Noted. I'll prepare my credentials. Good luck. You'll need it. Victoria set down her phone and looked out the hotel window at the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks still snow-covered despite the spring warmth creeping into the valleys. Somewhere out there, Lucas was explaining to his daughter that a stranger might become a friend, might become something more, might become someone important. And somewhere in Denver, Victoria's company was continuing without her, the machine she'd built running smoothly even in her absence. For the first time in 15 years, Victoria Hale wasn't sure which world she belonged to anymore. But she was determined to find out. The community dinner was held in the basement of Pinewood Community Church, a modest stone building that had probably stood at the edge of town for over a century. Victoria arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, carrying a store-bought pie that the woman at the general store had assured her was acceptable for potluck contributions. She felt ridiculous. A CEO who'd negotiated deals worth millions reduced to anxiety over whether her dessert choice would meet small-town approval. The basement was already crowded, long tables covered with checkered cloths and laden with casseroles, salads, and desserts, in a chaotic abundance that spoke to genuine community rather than careful coordination. Children ran between the tables while adults clustered in groups, their conversations creating a warm hum of familiarity. Victoria spotted Lucas immediately. He stood near the back wall talking to an older man in overalls, and beside him, holding his hand with the unconscious trust of a child who'd never doubted her father's presence, was Maya. The girl was small for 8, with her father's dark hair pulled into 2 braids and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore jeans and a t-shirt with a horse galloping across the front, and when she noticed Victoria approaching, her expression shifted to one of open curiosity. "Dad, is that her?" Lucas followed his daughter's gaze, and his expression softened when he saw Victoria. "That's her." "Victoria, this is Maya." "Maya, this is my friend Victoria that I told you about." Victoria knelt down to bring herself to Maya's eye level, a gesture she'd learned from watching executives interact with their children at company events. "Hi, Maya. Your dad tells me you're an expert on horses." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing. "Do you ride?" "I used to when I was younger. Haven't been on a horse in years, though." "What kind of horses did you ride?" "Quarter horses, mostly. My grandmother had a small ranch outside Colorado Springs. I spent summers there learning to ride." The answer must have been satisfactory because Maya's expression shifted from suspicious to merely cautious. "Do you remember their names?" "The one I rode most was called Copper. He was stubborn and smart and had a habit of stealing apples from my pockets when I wasn't paying attention." A small smile tugged at Maya's lips. "That sounds like Dakota. She's the horse I ride at Mrs. Henderson's ranch. She steals carrots. Sounds like they'd get along." "Maybe." Maya paused, then asked with the bluntness only children could manage. "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Victoria felt Lucas tense beside her, but she kept her voice calm and honest. "No. We're old friends who are getting to know each other again after a long time apart. But you might become his girlfriend?" "Maya," Lucas started, but Victoria touched his arm gently. "I don't know," she told Maya truthfully. "That's something your dad and I would have to figure out together. But right now, I'm just trying to be a good friend." Maya considered this with the seriousness of someone far older than 8. "Okay, but if you do become his girlfriend, you have to like horses and chocolate chip cookies, and you can't be mean to him because he's already been sad enough." The last part came out fierce and protective, and Victoria felt something in her chest tighten at this small girl's determination to guard her father's heart. "I promise I'm not here to make anyone sad," Victoria said quietly. "And I do like horses and chocolate chip cookies." "Good." Maya seemed satisfied with this answer and turned to her father. "Can I go play with Emma now?" "Stay where I can see you," Lucas said, and Maya darted off toward a group of children gathered near a makeshift play area. Lucas let out a long breath. "I'm sorry about that. She's been asking questions all day." "Don't apologize. She's protecting you. That's exactly what she should be doing." Victoria straightened, watching Maya join her friends with easy confidence. "She's wonderful, Lucas. You've done an amazing job raising her." "Some days I'm not sure about that. Other days she reminds me so much of Claire, it hurts to look at her." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Victoria heard the weight behind the words. Before she could respond, Sarah Patterson appeared with a woman who had to be in her 70s, sharp-eyed, and carrying herself with the authority of someone who'd lived in this town her entire life. "Victoria Hale, this is Margaret Henderson. She owns the ranch where Maya rides, and she's also the closest thing Pinewood has to a town historian." Margaret's handshake was firm, her gaze assessing. "Heard you're from Denver. Big city executive taking a vacation in our little town." "Something like that," Victoria said carefully. We don't get many big city executives here unless they're looking to buy property for development. You planning to turn Pinewood into condos and coffee shops?" The question was pointed enough that several nearby conversations paused, people turning to listen. "No, ma'am," Victoria said firmly. "I'm here for personal reasons, not business." "Personal reasons involving Lucas Reed, I hear." Victoria felt Lucas tense beside her, but she met Margaret's gaze without flinching. "Lucas helped me 15 years ago during a difficult time. I came to thank him properly and discovered we have some unfinished history. I'm taking some time to figure out what that means." The honesty seemed to surprise Margaret. Her expression shifted from suspicious to merely curious. "Well, at least you're direct about it. That's more than I can say for the last woman who came sniffing around Lucas with dollar signs in her eyes." "Margaret," Lucas protested, but the older woman waved him off. "Oh, hush, you know I'm right. That real estate agent from Vail who tried to convince you to sell your property last year wasn't interested in your charming personality." She turned back to Victoria. "You know he turned down $500,000 for that land? Could have been set for life, but he said it was Maya's inheritance and he wouldn't sell her future for quick cash." Victoria looked at Lucas with new understanding. $500,000 was life-changing money for someone running a small-town garage. The fact that he'd refused it spoke volumes about his priorities. "I didn't know that," Victoria said quietly. "Well, now you do. Lucas Reed is a good man who's had more than his share of grief. He doesn't need someone playing games with his heart or his daughter's stability. Margaret's tone softened slightly. But if you're genuine, if you're really here because you care about him and not what you can get from him, then welcome to Pinewood. We take care of our own here, but we're not unwelcoming to folks who prove themselves worthy. I'll do my best to prove myself worthy, Victoria said, meaning it. Margaret nodded, apparently satisfied, and moved off to join another conversation. Sarah gave Victoria an apologetic smile. That went better than I expected, actually. Margaret usually makes newcomers cry within the first 5 minutes. She's protective. I respect that. You handled it well. Lucas's voice was quiet, meant just for her. A lot of people would have gotten defensive or tried to use their success to intimidate her. You did neither. I'm not here to intimidate anyone. I'm here to understand your world, not force you into mine. The words hung between them, weighted with significance. Sarah, sensing the moment, excused herself tactfully, leaving them standing together at the edge of the gathering. This is what my life looks like, Lucas said, gesturing to the crowded room. Potluck dinners and small-town scrutiny, everyone knowing everyone's business, no privacy, no anonymity. It's the opposite of everything you're used to. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Before Lucas could respond, the dinner began in earnest. People filled plates, found seats, and conversation flowed around them in easy waves. Victoria sat with Lucas and Maya, fielding questions from curious neighbors and trying to remember names and faces. She met the couple who ran the general store, the retired teacher who led the town's book club, the young family who just moved to Pinewood from California seeking a simpler life. Everyone was polite, but Victoria could feel herself being evaluated with each conversation. They were trying to figure out if she was a threat or an opportunity, someone who would hurt Lucas or help him heal. She understood the instinct. These people had known him for years, had watched him survive devastating loss and rebuild a life focused entirely on his daughter. They weren't about to let some outsider disrupt that without serious vetting. Maya sat between Victoria and Lucas, eating with focused determination and occasionally interjecting comments about horses or school or her opinions on various casseroles. She was remarkably articulate for 8, with a dry sense of humor that caught Victoria off guard. Mrs. Patterson's green bean casserole has too many onions, Maya announced seriously. But you have to eat it anyway because she gets sad if people don't. Noted, Victoria said, dutifully eating her green beans despite the onion overload. And Mr. Chen's dumplings are the best thing here, but you have to get them early before they're all gone. Too late, Lucas said, showing his empty plate. I already ate 6. Dad, you're supposed to save some for other people. I'm teaching you an important life lesson about opportunity and timing. Maya rolled her eyes with impressive 8-year-old disdain. That's not a lesson. That's just being greedy. Victoria found herself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time in longer than she could remember. The easy banter between father and daughter, the warmth of the community around them, the simple pleasure of a shared meal. It was so far removed from her usual world of business dinners and networking events that it felt almost dreamlike. After dinner, as people began clearing plates and organizing leftovers, Victoria helped carry dishes to the kitchen. She found herself working alongside women who'd lived in Pinewood their entire lives, listening to their conversations about school board meetings and upcoming town events and whose daughter was dating whose son. "So what do you actually do?" asked a woman named Jennifer, who'd introduced herself as the town librarian. "Sarah said you're some kind of executive." "I run a commercial real estate development company in Denver." "That sounds impressive and also very stressful." "It can be both," Victoria admitted, scraping leftover casserole into a trash bin. "I spent the last 8 years building it from almost nothing. It became my entire life." "Became? Past tense?" Victoria paused, realizing the slip. "I'm taking a leave of absence, trying to figure out if there's more to life than quarterly earnings reports and board meetings." Jennifer studied her with the quiet intelligence of someone who spent their days surrounded by books and people's stories. "And you came to Pinewood to figure that out?" "I came to Pinewood because Lucas is here. The rest I'm making up as I go." "Well, that's honest, at least." Jennifer smiled. "For what it's worth, I think it's good for him. Lucas has been stuck for 3 years, not moving forward, not really living, just existing for Maya's sake. Maybe you'll remind him there's a difference." The words echoed what Sarah had said, And Victoria wondered if this was the consensus view in Pinewood, that Lucas Reed was a good man who'd survived but not recovered, who needed someone to pull him back into actual life. The question was whether Victoria was the right person for that job, or if she was just another complication he didn't need. Later, as the dinner wound down and families began heading home, Lucas found Victoria helping fold tablecloths with the efficiency that suggested she'd done this kind of work before. "You didn't have to help clean up," he said. "Why not? I ate the food, I should help with cleanup. That's how it works, right?" "That's how it works." He took one end of a tablecloth and they folded it together and practiced synchronization. "You surprised people tonight." "Surprised them how?" They expected a corporate executive who'd be uncomfortable in a church basement eating potluck casserole. Instead, they got someone who asked questions and remembered names and didn't act like she was better than everyone here. "I don't think I'm better than anyone here," Victoria said quietly. "If anything, I'm envious. These people have something I spent 15 years chasing money and success without ever finding." "What's that?" "Community, connection. A sense of belonging somewhere that isn't contingent on their job title or bank account." Lucas was quiet for a moment, then said, "It's not perfect. Small towns have their own problems. Everyone knows your business. People judge you based on choices your grandparents made. There's no anonymity, no escape from your own history. But there's also support. People who show up when you need them, who help raise your kids and bring casseroles when someone dies and notice when you're struggling." "True." He finished folding the last tablecloth and set it on the stack. "Maya likes you, by the way. She told me on the way to dinner that you passed the horse test and the honesty test." "There's an honesty test?" "She asks questions designed to see if people will lie to her. She's been lied to before, people who promised they'd stick around after Claire died and then disappeared. She's learned to test for sincerity." The weight of that broke Victoria's heart a little. "What happens if I fail her tests?" "Then you fail. And she'll never really trust you, no matter what happens between us." Lucas met her eyes directly. "That's the reality here, Victoria. My daughter's well-being trumps everything else. If this, whatever this is between us, becomes something that hurts her or makes her feel unsafe, it ends. No matter what I feel, no matter what you feel." "I understand." "Do you? Because in a few weeks or months, you're going to miss your old life. You're going to get bored with small-town dinners and local gossip. You're going to remember that you built an empire and walked away from it to chase a feeling that might not even be real. And when that happens, when you decide to go back to Denver and your real life, Maya will be the one who pays the price for my mistake of letting you get close." The fear in his voice was palpable, and Victoria realized this conversation had been coming since the moment she'd walked into his kitchen. Lucas wasn't just protecting his daughter, he was protecting himself from hope, from the possibility of losing someone else he cared about. "You're right," Victoria said carefully. "I might get bored. I might miss my old life. I might decide this was all a mistake driven by nostalgia and wishful thinking. But Lucas, you might decide the same thing. You might realize I don't fit into your world, that I'm too different or too complicated or too much of a reminder of the life you left behind. Risk goes both ways. The difference is Maya. If I get hurt, I'll survive. I've survived worse. But she's 8 years old and she's already lost one mother. I can't let her get attached to someone who might leave. Then what do you want from me? You want me to keep my distance? Interact with Maya only superficially? Pretend there's nothing between us?" "I don't know what I want," Lucas admitted, frustration bleeding into his voice. "I want you here and I want you gone. I want to see where this goes, and I want to protect Maya from the possibility of more loss. I want to believe in second chances, and I want to be realistic about the fact that our lives are incompatible." They stood in the empty church basement, the last two people remaining, surrounded by folded tablecloths and empty casserole dishes and the weight of impossible choices. "Maybe we're overthinking this," Victoria said finally. "Maybe instead of trying to predict the future and prevent every possible hurt, we just take it one day at a time. I'm here now. You're here now. Maya seems willing to give me a chance. Let's start with that and see what happens. And when your company calls and says they need you back, then I'll deal with it. But I didn't take a leave of absence on a whim, Lucas. I'm serious about this. about giving us a real chance to see if what I felt 15 years ago is still real now. Before Lucas could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. Dad, Emma's mom says she can give us a ride home if you're ready. Lucas looked at Victoria, something unresolved still hanging between them, but he nodded. We're ready. Let me grab our dish. As they walked out into the parking lot, Sarah pulled up in her minivan with Emma already buckled in the back seat. Maya climbed in beside her friend, and Lucas turned to Victoria one more time. Tomorrow's Saturday. I usually take Maya riding at Mrs. Henderson's ranch in the morning. You're welcome to come along if you want. It was an olive branch, or maybe a test. Victoria wasn't sure which. What time? 9 o'clock. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty. I'll be there. Lucas nodded and climbed into Sarah's van, and Victoria watched them drive away, taillights disappearing into the mountain darkness. She drove back to the hotel feeling the weight of everything that had been said and left unsaid. Lucas's fears were valid. She might get bored, might miss her old life, might prove unsuited to small-town existence. But his assumption that she would definitely leave, that failure was inevitable, stung more than she wanted to admit. Back in her hotel room, Victoria's phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 unread emails. Her company needed her, or thought they did. Marcus had sent 3 increasingly urgent messages about a potential acquisition opportunity that required her approval. Board members wanted updates. Department heads had questions only she could answer. Victoria stared at the screen, feeling the familiar pull of responsibility and importance. Her real life was calling, demanding her attention, reminding her that she'd built something significant that couldn't just be abandoned for a romantic fantasy. But instead of calling Marcus back, instead of diving into emails and reclaiming control, Victoria turned off her phone and went to bed. Because Lucas was right about one thing, she needed to be absolutely certain about what she wanted before she let Maya get any more attached. The girl had already lost too much. Victoria wouldn't add to that loss unless she was prepared to stay for the long haul. The question was, could she actually do that? Could Victoria Hale, who'd defined herself by corporate success for 15 years, find meaning in a life that offered connection instead of achievement, community instead of conquest? She fell asleep without answers, but with the determination to find them. The next morning, Victoria arrived at Henderson Ranch, dressed in jeans and boots she'd bought at the general store, feeling absurdly unprepared despite her childhood experience with horses. The ranch was beautiful, rolling pastures backed by mountains, a weathered barn that had clearly been standing for decades, fences that showed evidence of regular maintenance and care. Lucas's truck was already there, parked beside an older sedan that probably belonged to Margaret Henderson. Victoria could hear voices from the barn, Maya's excited chatter, a woman's patient responses, Lucas's deeper tones adding occasional comments. She found them in the barn's main aisle, where Maya stood beside a Palomino mare that was already saddled and ready. The girl's face lit up when she saw Victoria. You came. Dad said you might not since you're used to fancy things, and this is just a regular ranch. Victoria shot Lucas a look, and he had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed. I said you might have other commitments. No commitment's more important than this, Victoria said firmly, approaching the mare. Is this Dakota? Yeah. Want to meet her properly? Maya was already leading the horse forward, clearly comfortable with the animal's size and temperament. Hold out your hand flat so she can smell you. Victoria did as instructed, and the mare's soft nose investigated her palm with gentle curiosity. She's beautiful. She's stubborn and smart, and sometimes she tries to eat the fence posts, but yeah, she's pretty great. Maya stroked the horse's neck with obvious affection. Mrs. Henderson says I have a gift with horses. That means I understand them better than most people. I believe it, Victoria said, watching the easy rapport between girl and animal. Margaret Henderson emerged from a tack room carrying another saddle. She gave Victoria an appraising look that suggested last night's provisional approval could still be revoked at any moment. You said you can ride. How long since you've been on a horse? 15 years, give or take. Well, muscle memory's a real thing. We'll start you on Copper. He's older, steady, won't give you trouble unless you ask for it. The irony of the name wasn't lost on Victoria. Like the horse I learned on. Life's full of interesting coincidences. Margaret's tone suggested she didn't believe in coincidences at all. Lucas, get her tacked up. Maya, you can warm up Dakota in the arena while we get everyone else ready. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity, relearning how to saddle a horse, adjusting stirrups, finding her balance again after years away from riding. Lucas worked alongside her with patient efficiency, correcting her grip on the reins and reminding her about posture. You're tensing up, he said, his hand settling briefly on her shoulder. Horses sense that. Relax. Easy for him to say. Victoria was acutely aware of every eye watching her, Margaret evaluating her competence, Maya judging whether she'd been honest about her riding experience, Lucas probably waiting for her to give up and admit this was all too much work for someone used to boardrooms and executive assistants. But as Victoria finally settled into the saddle and felt Copper's steady presence beneath her, something shifted. The muscle memory Margaret had mentioned kicked in, her body remembering rhythms and balance it hadn't needed in 15 years. She walked Copper around the arena, then trotted, feeling more confident with each passing minute. Not bad, Margaret called from the fence. You actually know what you're doing. That's refreshing. They rode out as a group, Margaret leading on her own horse, Maya and Dakota in the middle, Lucas and Victoria bringing up the rear on their mounts. The trail led up into the foothills, winding through pine forests and across meadows beginning to green with spring growth. Maya kept up a running commentary about everything they passed, which trees the birds preferred, where she'd seen a deer last week, the spot where Dakota had spooked at a rabbit and nearly dumped her. She spoke with the unselfconscious enthusiasm of a child who felt completely safe in her environment, and watching her, Victoria felt something warm settle in her chest. This was what Lucas had built after losing his wife. Not just survival, but this, moments of joy and normalcy, experiences that would give Maya happy memories instead of just grief. He'd done it alone, without complaint, focused entirely on his daughter's well-being. You're good with her, Victoria said quietly, as Maya and Margaret rode ahead out of immediate earshot. I'm trying to be. Some days I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. She seems happy, confident. Those things don't happen by accident. Lucas was quiet for a moment, guiding his horse around a fallen log. After Claire died, I read every parenting book I could find, talked to counselors, support groups, anyone who could tell me how to help a 5-year-old process losing her mother. But at the end of the day, there's no manual for this. You just show up every day and do your best and hope it's enough. It's more than enough. She adores you. She also tests you constantly to see if you're going to leave like everyone else did. He said it matter-of-factly, but Victoria heard the pain underneath. After Claire died, people promised they'd help. Friends from her old job, neighbors, even some family. They meant well, but within 6 months, most of them had drifted away. Too busy, too uncomfortable with grief, too focused on their own lives. Maya learned early that people's promises don't always mean much. Is that why she asked me directly if I was going to be your girlfriend? She was establishing terms? Probably. She's protective of me, but she's also protecting herself. If she knows up front what to expect, she can guard her heart accordingly. They rode in silence for a while, the trail climbing steadily higher, the views opening up to show the valley spread below them. Victoria could see all of Pinewood from here, the town looking like something from a storybook, small and contained and completely separate from the world she knew. This is going to sound crazy, Victoria said eventually, but I haven't felt this peaceful in years, just riding a horse through the mountains, no agenda, no meetings, nothing that needs my immediate attention. I'd forgotten what that feels like. Is that enough for you, though? Peace and mountains and small-town life? Or will you wake up next week missing the rush of closing deals and making decisions that affect hundreds of people? I don't know, Victoria admitted, but I'm willing to find out. Ahead of them, Maya had stopped to examine something on the trail, probably a flower or an interesting rock given her running commentary about local flora and fauna. Margaret waited patiently while the girl investigated, clearly used to these educational detours. She's testing you today too, Lucas said. Well, seeing if you'll get impatient or bored, if you'll demand we move faster or complain about the pace. Claire used to do that. Loved the idea of family outings, but get frustrated with how slow everything moved with a child involved. I'm not Claire. I know. But you're not Claire either, if that makes sense. You're both successful, Driven women who built careers on efficiency and results. Maya will compare you whether she means to or not. The words stung because they were true. Victoria was used to optimizing everything, finding the most efficient path from point A to point B. The idea of meandering along a trail while an 8-year-old examined every pine cone probably would have frustrated her a week ago. But today, watching Maya's genuine delight in small discoveries, Victoria found she didn't mind the slow pace at all. They rode for another hour, eventually stopping at a clearing with a view that seemed to encompass the entire world. Margaret unpacked sandwiches from her saddlebags. Apparently this was a planned lunch ride, and they ate sitting on sun-warmed rocks while the horses grazed nearby. "Did you know," Maya announced through a mouthful of peanut butter sandwich, "that horses can sleep standing up, but they need to lie down sometimes for deep sleep?" "I did not know that," Victoria said seriously, "and they can run within hours of being born. And they remember people for their whole lives, so if you're mean to a horse, it'll remember forever." "That's a good reason to always be kind to them." "That's a good reason to be kind to everyone," Maya corrected. "Dad says you should treat everyone like they'll remember everything you do, because they probably will." Victoria met Lucas's eyes over Maya's head and saw the hint of embarrassment there. "Your dad is a wise man." "He's okay," Maya said with feigned indifference that didn't match the adoration in her eyes when she looked at her father. "Sometimes he burns dinner and he can't braid hair very well, and he doesn't understand why I need 17 stuffed animals on my bed. But yeah, he's pretty good." The casual acceptance in her voice, acknowledging imperfections while maintaining absolute security in her father's love, made Victoria's throat tight. This child had lost so much, but Lucas had given her something invaluable in return. The certainty that she was loved unconditionally, imperfect dinner and all. As they packed up and prepared for the ride back, Victoria's phone buzzed insistently in her pocket. She'd turned it back on this morning out of habit, and now it was catching up on missed calls and messages. Lucas noticed her checking it. "Something urgent?" "Just my company wondering where I am and what I'm doing." Victoria silenced the phone without reading the messages. "They'll survive without me for a few more hours." But later, after they'd returned to the ranch and helped untack the horses, and Maya had run off to help Margaret feed the barn cats, Lucas cornered Victoria by her car. "Your phone rang 7 times during lunch. That's not nothing. It's not life or death either. But it's important." He leaned against her Mercedes, his expression troubled. "This is what I was talking about, Victoria. Your real life is calling. At some point, you're going to have to answer. I took a leave of absence. I have excellent people running things. The company doesn't need me hovering over every decision." "Maybe not, but you need it. I can see it in the way you look at that phone, like you're cutting off a limb by not answering. You built that company. It's part of who you are. You can't just walk away from it indefinitely." Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could absolutely prioritize personal connections over professional obligations. But Lucas knew her better than she wanted to admit. The truth was, ignoring those calls felt wrong on a visceral level. She'd spent 15 years training herself to always be available, always responsive, always in control. "So what do you want me to do?" she asked, hearing the frustration in her own voice. "Choose right now between my company and being here? Give you some guarantee that I'll never check my phone or think about work or miss the life I built? I want you to be honest about what you can actually sustain, not what you wish you could do or what sounds romantic in theory, but what you can really maintain long term." Before Victoria could respond, Maya came running back from the barn, braids flying, face flushed with excitement. "Mrs. Henderson says there's going to be a horse show next month, and I can enter Dakota in the youth division, and will you come watch, both of you?" She said it so naturally, including Victoria in the invitation without hesitation, that Victoria felt her carefully constructed arguments crumble. "I'll be there," Victoria promised, even as Lucas's expression tightened with concern. Because that was the thing Lucas didn't understand yet. Victoria Hale didn't make promises lightly, and now that she'd made one to his daughter, she'd move heaven and earth to keep it, even if that meant fundamentally changing the life she'd built over the past 15 years. The question was whether Lucas would let her try, or if his fear of Maya getting hurt would push Victoria away before she had the chance to prove herself. They left the ranch with that tension unresolved, Maya chattering happily in the back of Lucas's truck while Victoria followed in her Mercedes. already planning how she could restructure her company to allow for a life that included monthly horse shows and community dinners and the slow, patient building of something real. Because she was beginning to understand what she'd been missing all these years. Success without connection was just expensive loneliness. And Victoria had been lonely for far too long. The crisis came 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon when Victoria was helping Maya with homework at the kitchen table. Her phone rang with Marcus's name flashing on the screen, and this time the urgency in his voice couldn't be ignored. "Victoria, we have a serious problem. The Sterling acquisition is falling apart. They want to renegotiate terms and they're threatening to walk if you're not personally involved in the discussions. The board is pushing for an emergency meeting tomorrow morning in Denver." Victoria felt her stomach drop. The Sterling deal represented 18 months of work and would expand their portfolio into 3 new markets. Losing it would cost the company millions in projected revenue and damage their reputation with other potential acquisitions. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I can't fix it without you. They specifically asked for you, Victoria. Said they wouldn't finalize anything unless you were at the table." She looked at Maya, who was working on math problems with intense concentration, her tongue poking out slightly as she calculated. Victoria had promised to help her finish homework and then make dinner. Lucas was working late on a complicated engine repair and wouldn't be home until after 7. "I need to make some calls," Victoria said into the phone. "Give me an hour." She hung up and Maya looked up, concern crossing her face with a perceptiveness beyond her years. "Is something wrong?" "Just work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "But you look worried." Victoria forced a smile. "I'm fine. Let's finish these math problems, okay?" They worked through the rest of the homework, but Victoria's mind was racing. The Sterling deal was critical. Walking away from it would hurt the company significantly. But going back to Denver meant breaking her promise to stay, meant proving Lucas right about her inability to maintain this life, meant showing Maya that work would always come first. After Maya had finished her homework and settled in front of the television with a snack, Victoria stepped outside and called Marcus back. "I can't come tomorrow. Tell them I'll video conference for the meeting, but I'm not returning to Denver." There was a long pause. "Victoria, they were explicit. They want you here in person. They said video conferences feel impersonal, and they need to see your commitment to this deal." "Then tell them my commitment is demonstrated by 18 months of work, detailed proposals, and fair terms. If they need me to fly to Denver for a meeting to prove I care, then maybe they're not the partners we want." "You're willing to risk this entire acquisition?" Victoria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. "I'm willing to risk it for something more important, yes." "What's more important than a deal this size?" "That's not something I can explain over the phone, Marcus, but I trust you to handle this. You're fully capable of closing this deal without me hovering. Present our final offer, make it clear the terms are fair, and if they walk, we'll find other opportunities." Another pause, longer this time. "Okay, I'll do my best, but Victoria, the board is going to have questions about your continued absence. Schedule a board call for Friday. I'll address their concerns then. And Marcus, thank you for handling this. I know it's not what you expected when I took this leave. Just promise me you know what you're doing." "I'm figuring it out as I go, but yeah, I know what I'm doing." She hung up feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified. She'd just put a major acquisition at risk, potentially damaged her company's reputation, and made a choice that would have been unthinkable 3 weeks ago. But when she went back inside and found Maya curled up on the couch, the girl looked up with complete trust and said, "Dad texted that he'll be another hour. Can you stay for dinner?" Victoria sat down beside her. "I can definitely stay for dinner. What should we make?" "Spaghetti. Dad always burns the sauce, but maybe you'll be better at it." They cooked together, Maya narrating her entire day while Victoria chopped vegetables and tried to remember the last time she'd actually cooked a meal from scratch, instead of ordering takeout or eating at restaurants. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and tomatoes, and Maya set the table with elaborate care, making sure the forks were perfectly aligned. Lucas came home just as they were plating the food, his clothes stained with grease, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, Victoria at the stove, Maya chattering about her day, dinner on the table. "You cooked," he said, surprise clear in his voice. "Maya supervised. I just followed orders." "The sauce isn't burned," Maya announced proudly. We actually did it right. Something shifted in Lucas's expression as he looked at Victoria, something that might have been hope or might have been fear. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Victoria met his eyes, trying to communicate everything she couldn't say in front of Maya. Besides, I promised to help with homework and make dinner. I keep my promises. They ate together, the conversation flowing easily despite the undercurrent of tension between the adults. Maya dominated the discussion with detailed accounts of recess drama and her teacher's unfair policy on bathroom breaks, and Lucas gradually relaxed, the exhaustion fading as he engaged with his daughter's stories. After dinner, Maya went to get ready for bed, and Lucas helped Victoria clean up. They worked in silence for a few minutes before he finally spoke. Your company called. I saw you on the phone earlier looking stressed. They have a deal falling apart. Wanted me in Denver tomorrow for emergency meetings. Lucas's hand stilled in the dishwater. And you said no. I said I'd video conference, but I wasn't leaving Pinewood. Victoria, I made a commitment to be here, Lucas. To give this a real chance. I can't do that if I run back to Denver every time there's a crisis. But this wasn't just any crisis. I could see it on your face. This was important. Victoria dried a plate with more force than necessary. It was important. But so is this. So is keeping my promise to Maya about dinner. So is proving to you that I'm serious about making this work. By potentially destroying your company? By trusting my team to handle things without me. By accepting that I don't have to control every decision personally. By choosing to prioritize people over profits for once in my life. Lucas turned to face her, his expression troubled. What happens when the company really does need you? When there's a crisis your team can't solve? Are you going to resent being stuck here in Pinewood while your life's work falls apart in Denver? I don't know, Victoria admitted, but I know I'll resent myself more if I don't even try to build something real here. If I let fear of potential problems prevent me from taking actual risks. This isn't just about you taking risks. Every choice you make affects Maya. If you stay and it doesn't work out, if you eventually leave, she'll be hurt. That's not a hypothetical, that's a certainty. Before Victoria could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway, wearing pajamas covered in horses, her hair wet from her shower. I'm ready for story time, Dad. Lucas wiped his hands on a towel, his expression still troubled, but when he looked at his daughter, his face softened. Go pick out a book. I'll be there in a minute. Maya hesitated, looking between her father and Victoria with the uncanny perceptiveness children develop when they've learned to read adult tension. Are you guys fighting? No, sweetheart, Lucas said gently. Just talking about grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. But Victoria looks sad. Victoria managed to smile. I'm fine, Maya. Your dad and I just have some things to figure out. Go pick your book. After Maya had disappeared down the hallway, Lucas sighed heavily. She's getting attached to you. Can't you see that? I see it. And I'm getting attached to her too. That's not a problem. That's the entire point. The point is supposed to be protecting her from getting hurt again. You can't protect her from everything, Lucas. Life doesn't work that way. Yes, I might leave, but you might also get hit by a car tomorrow, or I might, or any number of terrible things could happen. You can't prevent all possible pain. All you can do is show up and be honest and do your best. That's easy to say when you're not the one who's already watched her lose someone she loved. The pain in his voice cut through Victoria's frustration, reminding her that this wasn't just Lucas being difficult. This was a father who'd held his daughter through inconsolable grief and was terrified of seeing her go through that again. You're right, Victoria said softly. I haven't been through what you have. I don't know what it's like to watch someone you love grieve that deeply. But I do know what it's like to spend 15 years afraid of connection because one bad night taught me the world was dangerous. And I know that fear kept me safe, but it also kept me alone. Is that what you want for Maya? For her to grow up so afraid of loss that she never lets anyone get close? Lucas didn't answer. He just stood there, torn between fear and hope, unable to choose either. Think about it, Victoria said, grabbing her purse. I'm going back to the hotel. Tell Maya good night for me. She left before he could respond, before the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes could fall, before she said something she'd regret. The drive back to the Mountain View Inn felt longer than usual. The darkness outside her windows, absolute in a way city darkness never was. No streetlights here, no ambient glow from buildings and traffic. Just pure mountain night, vast and impersonal. Back in her hotel room, Victoria finally let herself acknowledge the doubt creeping in. Maybe Lucas was right. Maybe she was being selfish, pursuing her own emotional needs without fully considering the impact on an 8-year-old girl. Maybe the responsible thing was to walk away now before Maya got any more attached, before the inevitable failure hurt more people. Her phone buzzed with an email from Marcus. The Sterling team had agreed to the video conference, though they weren't happy about it. The meeting was scheduled for 9 tomorrow morning, Denver time. Victoria would need to be prepared, professional, and convincing despite participating remotely. She spent the next 3 hours reviewing files and preparing arguments, falling back into the familiar rhythms of corporate strategy. This she understood. This made sense. Clear objectives, measurable outcomes, strategies that could be analyzed and optimized. Unlike human relationships, which were messy and unpredictable and full of variables she couldn't control. The next morning, Victoria set up her laptop in her hotel room and joined the video conference precisely on time. The Sterling team appeared on screen, 3 executives in a Denver conference room, expressions ranging from annoyed to skeptical. "Ms. Hale, we appreciate you making time for this meeting," the lead negotiator said with barely concealed sarcasm. "Though we had hoped to have this conversation in person." Victoria kept her expression neutral and professional. "I understand your preference, but I'm currently out of the office addressing personal matters. However, I'm fully prepared to discuss any concerns you have about our proposal." What followed was 2 hours of intense negotiation. The Sterling team pushed for concessions, questioned terms, and generally tested whether Victoria's remote presence indicated weakness or lack of commitment. But Victoria had spent 15 years mastering this kind of corporate chess match. She countered their arguments with data, defended her position with facts, and ultimately held firm on the terms that mattered. By the end of the call, they'd reached an agreement. Not everything Victoria had hoped for, but close enough that both sides could claim victory. The Sterling executives signed off looking grudgingly satisfied, and Marcus stayed on the line after they disconnected. "That was impressive," he said. "You didn't give an inch where it mattered." "Because our terms were fair and they knew it. They just wanted to see if I'd fold under pressure." "The board will be relieved. This deal keeps our quarterly projections on track." Victoria rubbed her temples, feeling the tension of the morning settling into a headache. "Good. Schedule that board call for Friday like we discussed. I need to address some things with them." "About your leave of absence?" "About making it more permanent, or at least longer term than they're probably comfortable with." There was a pause. "Victoria, are you sure about this? You've spent years building this company. Is whatever you're doing in that small town worth potentially losing that?" "I'm not losing anything, Marcus. I'm restructuring my priorities. There's a difference." After she hung up, Victoria sat in the silent hotel room feeling simultaneously triumphant and empty. She'd closed the deal, proved her team could function with minimal direct involvement, and demonstrated that she could handle crises remotely. But the victory felt hollow, without anyone to share it with. She picked up her phone to text Lucas, then stopped. He was probably at the garage, and she wasn't sure what she'd say anyway. That she'd risked a major acquisition and won? That she'd proven she could work remotely? That she was trying to build a life that included both professional success and personal connection, but wasn't sure if he'd let her? Instead, she drove to the general store and bought ingredients for cookies. If she was going to be in Pinewood, if she was going to try to become part of this community, she might as well learn to bake. The woman behind the counter, Jennifer, the librarian, working a shift at her family's store, raised an eyebrow at Victoria's purchases. "Planning to bake?" "Planning to learn to bake. There's a difference." "Need any advice? My grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe is legendary around here." "I'll take all the help I can get." Jennifer wrote down the recipe on the back of a receipt, adding notes about oven temperature and baking time. "Fair warning, the first batch always comes out weird. Don't get discouraged." Victoria took the recipe with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, really." "You're welcome. And Victoria, whatever's going on between you and Lucas, don't give up too easily. He's been alone for 3 years because he's scared of losing someone else. But that's not really living, it's just existing." The word stayed with Victoria as she drove back to the hotel and attempted her first batch of cookies. Jennifer was right. They came out weird, too flat, and somehow both burned and underdone. But the second batch was better, and the third batch was actually edible. She was pulling the fourth batch from the oven when her phone rang. Not Marcus this time, but the school. Ms. Hale, this is Principal Morrison at Pinewood Elementary. I'm calling because Maya Reed listed you as an emergency contact and we haven't been able to reach her father. Victoria's heart stopped. What happened? Is Maya okay? She's fine physically, but there's been an incident. Maya got into an altercation with another student, and we need a parent or guardian to come pick her up. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Victoria grabbed her keys and drove to the school faster than was probably wise, her mind racing through terrible possibilities. Maya hurt, Maya in trouble, Maya needing help, and Lucas unreachable. The elementary school was a small brick building at the edge of town, and Victoria found the principal's office easily. Maya sat in a chair outside, arms crossed, her face tear-stained but defiant. When she saw Victoria, something in her expression crumbled. I'm sorry. I know you were probably busy with important stuff. Dad wasn't answering, and you were the only other person I could think of. Victoria knelt in front of Maya's chair, her heart breaking at the defeat in the girl's voice. Hey, you are important stuff. Don't ever apologize for needing help. Tell me what happened. Bus. Then, Tommy Henderson said my mom died because she didn't love me enough to be careful. He said if she really loved me, she wouldn't have gotten in a car accident, so I punched him. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She pulled Maya into a fierce hug, feeling the girl's small body shake with suppressed sobs. You listen to me, Victoria said firmly, pulling back to look Maya in the eyes. What Tommy said was cruel and wrong and not true at all. Your mother's death was an accident, a terrible, unfair accident. It had nothing to do with how much she loved you. But what if he's right? What if she was distracted thinking about something else and that's why she crashed? Even if that were true, which we have no way of knowing, it still wouldn't mean she didn't love you. People have accidents. Sometimes terrible things happen and there's no reason for it. But your mother loved you absolutely, and your father loves you absolutely, and nothing that happened changes that. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I shouldn't have hit Tommy. Probably not. Violence usually isn't the answer, but I understand why you did it, and we'll figure out how to handle this together. Principal Morrison emerged from his office, a kindly-looking man in his 50s who'd probably seen every kind of childhood drama imaginable. Ms. Hale, thank you for coming. I've been trying to reach Lucas, but he's not answering. He's probably in the middle of a repair job. His phone is usually off when he's working on engines. Victoria stood but kept one hand on Maya's shoulder. What happened with the other boy? Tommy Henderson has been sent home as well. Both children will need to serve detention, and I'd like to have a conference with both families to address the underlying issues. But given the nature of what Tommy said, I'm inclined to be lenient with Maya's response. She knows hitting wasn't the right choice, but she was defending her mother's memory. I think that deserves some understanding. I agree. Maya, why don't you wait in the outer office while I talk to Ms. Hale for a moment? Once Maya was out of earshot, Principal Morrison's expression turned more serious. I need to ask, are you authorized to pick up Maya? I have you listed as an emergency contact, but I don't have any official paperwork establishing your relationship to the family. Victoria hesitated, realizing she'd walked into a situation that could get complicated fast. I'm a close friend of Lucas's. Maya added me to the emergency contact list herself. I should probably have discussed that with Lucas first. Normally, I'd require parental authorization, but given the circumstances and the fact that I haven't been able to reach Lucas, I'm going to allow it this time. However, you'll need to have Lucas call me to officially authorize you for future emergencies. I understand, thank you. Victoria collected Maya and they walked to her car in silence. Once they were both buckled in, Maya spoke quietly. Are you mad at me? For hitting Tommy? I'm disappointed you made that choice. For calling me when you needed help? Absolutely not. I'm honored you trusted me enough to list me as an emergency contact. I put you on the form last week. Dad doesn't know. I just thought... Maya's voice wavered. I thought if something happened and Dad couldn't come, maybe you would. But I know you have important work stuff and probably didn't want to be bothered with my problems. Victoria pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face Maya directly. Listen to me very carefully. You are not a bothering. Your problems are not an inconvenience. If you ever need help, for any reason, you call me. I don't care what meeting I'm in or what deal I'm negotiating. You call me and I will come. Do you understand? Maya nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. But what if you leave? What if you go back to Denver and decide you don't want to be part of our lives anymore? Dad says you might, and then I'll be sad like I was when Mom died. The honesty of it, the raw vulnerability in this 8-year-old's voice, broke something open in Victoria's chest. This was what Lucas had been trying to protect. This exact moment of a child asking for promises no adult could absolutely guarantee. But maybe that was the point. Maybe love wasn't about guarantees. Maybe it was about choosing to show up anyway, despite the uncertainty. I can't promise I'll never leave Pinewood, Victoria said carefully. Life is complicated and unpredictable. But I can promise that if I do leave, it won't be because I don't care about you. It would only be because circumstances made it impossible to stay. And even then, even if I had to go back to Denver, we'd find ways to stay connected. Phone calls, visits, whatever it took. Because you matter to me, Maya. You and your dad both matter to me. Do you love him? The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Victoria didn't have time to construct a careful answer. I think I might. I'm still figuring it out. Does he love you? I don't know. You'd have to ask him. Maya considered this with the seriousness of someone weighing important matters. He looks at you the way he used to look at Mom, like you're the most important person in the room. I think that means he loves you, but he's scared. Why would he be scared? Because Mom died and it made him really sad. I think he's worried that if he loves you, you might die too, or leave, or something else bad might happen. So he's trying not to love you so it won't hurt if you go away. The wisdom in Maya's assessment took Victoria's breath away. This child understood her father better than Lucas probably understood himself. That's very insightful, Victoria said softly. You're a pretty smart kid, you know that? I know. Everyone says so. Maya managed a small smile. Can we go get ice cream? I'm supposed to be in trouble, but ice cream makes everything better. Victoria laughed despite herself. Let's call your dad first and let him know what happened. Then we'll see about ice cream. She dialed Lucas's number, and this time he answered, concern immediate in his voice when he saw her number instead of the school's. Victoria, is everything okay? Maya's fine. There was an incident at school. She got in a fight, and I picked her up because they couldn't reach you. What? Why didn't they? My phone was off. I was in the middle of a timing belt replacement. Is she hurt? She's fine. A little shaken up, but not hurt. I have her with me now. I'm leaving the garage now. Where are you? Pulled over on Maple Street. Lucas, she's okay. Take your time. I'll be there in 5 minutes. He arrived in 3, his truck pulling up behind Victoria's Mercedes, with enough speed to suggest he'd broken several traffic laws getting there. He was out of the vehicle before it had fully stopped, pulling open Maya's door and checking her over with frantic hands. I'm okay, Dad. Really? What happened? Who did you fight with? Are you hurt anywhere? Maya recounted the story, Tommy's cruel words, her violent response, Principal Morrison's decision. Lucas listened with an expression that cycled through shock, anger, pride, and concern in rapid succession. When Maya finished, Lucas pulled her into a tight hug. I'm proud of you for defending your mother's memory. I'm not proud that you hit someone. We're going to have a long talk about better ways to handle cruel people, but I understand why you did it. Ms. Hale said the same thing. Lucas looked at Victoria over Maya's head, his expression complicated. Thank you for picking her up. And for... He gestured vaguely at the scene, at the way Maya was leaning against Victoria's car, at the evidence of Victoria stepping into a parental role without hesitation. She called me, Victoria said simply. I came. That's what you do for people you care about. Even when you're in the middle of important work meetings. I'd already finished the meeting. Sterling deal is closed. She said it casually, but saw the moment Lucas understood what that meant. She'd restructured a major acquisition to avoid traveling to Denver, then immediately showed up when Maya needed her. We need to talk, Lucas said quietly. I know. But maybe after Maya's had some ice cream and calmed down? A small smile tugged at his lips. Ice cream is medicinal in this family, essential for processing difficult emotions. They ended up at Pinewood's only ice cream shop, a tiny place run by an older couple who knew everyone's favorite flavors. Maya ordered chocolate chip with gummy bears, a combination that made Victoria's teeth hurt just looking at it, but the girl's mood improved immediately upon receiving her cone. Lucas and Victoria sat at a small table while Maya ate at the counter, swinging her legs and chatting with Mrs. Chen about horses and school and whatever else came to mind. "I'm sorry," Lucas said quietly, "about what I said last night, about you potentially destroying your company. That wasn't fair. It was a legitimate concern. Maybe. But it was also me projecting my own fears onto your choices. You handled that deal remotely and successfully. You proved you could maintain your career while being present here. And then when Maya needed you, you dropped everything and showed up without hesitation." He met her eyes directly. "That's not someone who's going to abandon us when things get hard. That's someone who keeps her promises." Victoria felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "I meant what I said to Maya. I can't promise I'll never leave Pinewood. Life is too unpredictable for absolute guarantees, but I can promise I'm here now, trying my best to build something real. And I'm not going to run away the first time things get complicated." "Things are going to get very complicated," Lucas warned. "Small town life, a child who's testing you constantly, a widower with more emotional baggage than any reasonable person would want to deal with. This isn't a fairy tale, Victoria. It's messy and hard, and there are no guarantees of happy endings." "I don't need fairy tales. I need real. And messy and hard and uncertain is still better than what I had before, which was successful and lonely and so empty I didn't even realize how much I'd hollowed myself out until I came here." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, watching his daughter at the counter, her earlier tears forgotten in the simple joy of ice cream and friendly conversation. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. "I'm terrified of losing someone else I love. The idea of letting you fully into our lives, of Maya getting more attached, of me getting more attached, it scares me more than anything has in 3 years, because I know how much it hurts when someone you love disappears from your life, and I don't know if I could survive going through that again." "So what do we do?" Victoria asked. "Keep our distance forever? Never take the risk? Protect ourselves right into separate, lonely lives? Or we take it slow? We keep building what we're building. We let Maya get attached in increments instead of all at once. We make sure you have an exit strategy that doesn't completely devastate everyone involved." He paused. "And we acknowledge that I'm probably going to push you away sometimes because I'm scared, and you're probably going to have moments when you miss your old life and wonder what you've gotten yourself into, and we figure out how to work through those things instead of running from them." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of forever. But it was real. An honest acknowledgement of the challenges they faced and a commitment to facing them together. "I can work with that," Victoria said. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand, the gesture simple but weighted with significance. "Thank you for showing up today, for Maya, and for giving me a reason to believe this might actually work." At the counter, Maya turned and saw them holding hands. Her face lit up with a smile that suggested she'd known all along this was how things would turn out, that her 8-year-old wisdom had seen something the adults were too scared to acknowledge. Victoria smiled back, feeling for the first time since she'd arrived in Pinewood that she might actually belong here. Not despite her complicated life and demanding career, but because she'd found people who mattered more than quarterly earnings and business acquisitions. People worth staying for, worth restructuring her entire life for, worth taking risks for, even knowing those risks might break her heart. And as Maya ran over to tell them about Mrs. Chen's new cat and its apparently fascinating habit of sleeping in unusual places, Victoria realized she'd already made her choice. She was staying. However long it took, whatever it cost, she was staying. Because some second chances were worth everything. The weeks that followed the ice cream shop conversation fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and deliberately constructed, like they were all learning the steps to a dance none of them had performed before. Victoria extended her hotel stay indefinitely, then eventually rented a small cabin on the outskirts of town when the hotel's manager gently suggested that monthly rates at a proper residence might make more financial sense. The cabin was modest, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that had seen better decades, a porch that overlooked the mountains, but it was hers, and that mattered in ways Victoria hadn't expected. She restructured her company with surgical precision, promoting Marcus to co-CEO with equal authority and redistributing responsibilities across her executive team. The board resisted at first, concerned about divided leadership and Victoria's diminished presence, but she came to the Friday call prepared with data showing that her micromanagement had actually created bottlenecks. Companies with distributed leadership models showed better long-term growth and innovation. She wasn't abandoning ship. She was building a sustainable structure that didn't depend on her constant presence. "You're sure about this?" her board chair had asked during that call, his face pixelated on her laptop screen, but his skepticism coming through clearly. "I've never been more sure of anything," Victoria had replied, and meant it. She established a schedule. 3 days a week fully focused on company business, video conferences and strategy sessions, and the work that still needed her specific expertise. 2 days completely off, devoted to Pinewood and the life she was building there. Weekends flexible, depending on what Maya and Lucas needed. It wasn't perfect, but it was sustainable, and sustainability mattered more than perfection. Maya tested the boundaries constantly, in ways both obvious and subtle. She'd invite Victoria to school events and watch carefully to see if she'd actually show up. She'd mention things she wanted to do, visit the Denver Zoo, go hiking to a particular waterfall, learn to bake bread, and wait to see if Victoria remembered and followed through. Each promise kept was a brick laid in the foundation of trust, each consistent presence a proof that maybe, just maybe, Victoria wasn't going to disappear like so many others had. Lucas tested boundaries too, though his tests were quieter. He'd mentioned car repairs he needed to handle alone, giving Victoria easy outs from family time. He'd referenced the cultural differences between her world and his, highlighting the gaps that could drive them apart. He'd retreat emotionally whenever things felt too good, too stable, as if bracing for inevitable disaster. But Victoria had learned patience. She'd built a company from nothing. She knew how to play the long game, how to persist through setbacks, how to trust the process even when immediate results weren't visible. So she showed up anyway, stayed anyway, proved through consistency rather than grand gestures that she meant what she'd promised. The Friday before Maya's horse show, Victoria was working in her cabin when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, probably a spam call, but something made her pick up. "Is this Victoria Hale?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Speaking." "This is Principal Morrison from Pinewood Elementary. I'm calling because we have a situation with Maya Reed and we can't reach her father. You're still listed as an emergency contact. Is that still accurate?" Victoria's heart jumped. "Yes, absolutely. What happened?" "Maya's fine, but she's quite upset. Another student made some unkind comments and Maya locked herself in the bathroom. She's asking for you specifically. Would you be able to come to the school?" "I'll be there in 5 minutes." Victoria grabbed her keys and drove to the school, her mind racing through possibilities. Another confrontation with Tommy Henderson? Someone new? Had Maya been hurt physically or just emotionally? She found Principal Morrison waiting outside the girls' bathroom, his expression concerned but not panicked. "She's been in there about 20 minutes, he explained quietly. "Won't talk to me or her teacher. Just keeps saying she wants Victoria." Victoria knocked gently on the bathroom door. "Maya, it's me. Can I come in?" There was a long pause, then the sound of a lock turning. Victoria slipped inside and found Maya sitting on the floor between two sinks, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red from crying. "Hey," Victoria said softly, sitting down beside her on the cold tile. "What happened?" "Stupid Carly Morrison said you're not really part of our family because you don't live with us, and you're not married to my dad, and you're just pretending to care because you feel sorry for us." The words came out in a rush, anger and hurt mixing together. "And I said that's not true. You do care about us." But then she said to prove it, and I couldn't think of how, and everyone was listening, and I had to get away. Victoria felt her heart break and surge with protective fury in equal measure. "Carly Morrison? Any relation to Principal Morrison?" "His daughter. She's in 5th grade and thinks she's better than everyone." "Okay. First, let's address what Carly said. She's wrong. I'm not pretending anything, and I don't feel sorry for you. I care about you because you're smart and brave and kind, and you make me laugh. I care about your dad because he's one of the best people I've ever met. Those are choices I'm making because I want to, not because I pity anyone. But we're not really a family, Maya said, her voice small and defeated. She's right about that. You have your own house and your own life, and you could leave whenever you want. Victoria took a deep breath, knowing this moment mattered more than almost anything that had come before. Family isn't just about who lives in the same house or shares the same last name. Family is about who shows up for you, who keeps their promises, who you trust to be there when things are hard. By that definition, we absolutely are a family, Maya. Maybe not a traditional one, but a real one. Then why don't you live with us? If we're really family, why are you still in that cabin by yourself? It was a fair question, and Maya deserved an honest answer. Because your dad and I are still figuring things out. We're taking it slow to make sure we're building something that will last. But taking it slow doesn't mean I care any less. It just means we're being careful and thoughtful about how we move forward. Maya considered this, her tears slowing. Do you love him? Yes, Victoria said without hesitation. I do. Does he love you? I think so, but you'd have to ask him to be sure. Are you going to get married? Victoria smiled gently. I don't know. Maybe someday, if that's what we both want. But marriage isn't what makes a family real, Maya. Commitment does. Showing up does. And I'm committed to you and your dad whether we ever get married or not. Promise? Promise. Cross my heart. Victoria made the gesture seriously, knowing that to Maya, promises were currency more valuable than anything else. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm sorry I locked myself in the bathroom. That was probably dramatic. A little dramatic, maybe, but you were hurt and overwhelmed and needed space to process. That's actually pretty emotionally intelligent behavior. Emotionally intelligent is just a fancy way of saying I had feelings and didn't know what to do with them. Exactly. Welcome to being human. It doesn't get less confusing when you're an adult, we just get better at hiding it. That earned a small laugh, and Maya stood up, brushing off her jeans. Can you tell Principal Morrison I'm okay now, and maybe suggest that his daughter should mind her own business? I'll handle it diplomatically. They emerged from the bathroom to find not just Principal Morrison waiting, but Lucas, who must have finally gotten the school's messages. His face went through several emotions when he saw them. Relief, concern, something that might have been gratitude. I'm okay, Dad, Maya said before he could speak. Carly Morrison was being mean and I got upset, but Victoria talked to me and I feel better now. Lucas looked at Victoria over his daughter's head, his expression saying things he couldn't voice in front of Maya and the principal. Thank you, he said simply. Always, Victoria replied. Principal Morrison cleared his throat. I'll be having a conversation with Carly about appropriate behavior. Maya, you're free to go back to class when you feel ready. I'm ready now, Maya announced with renewed confidence. And Principal Morrison, you should tell Carly that family comes in all different shapes and sizes. And just because someone's family doesn't look like hers, doesn't mean it's not real. The principal's expression suggested his daughter was about to receive a very thorough lecture about kindness and assumptions. I will absolutely tell her that. Thank you for the reminder, Maya. After Maya had returned to class, Lucas walked Victoria to her car, his hands shoved deep in his pockets in a gesture she'd learned meant he was processing something difficult. She asked you if you loved me, he said. It wasn't a question. She did. What did you tell her? Victoria leaned against her Mercedes, studying his face. I told her the truth, that I do love you. Was I wrong to be that honest with her? Lucas was quiet for a long moment, staring at the mountains rising in the distance. No, you were right to be honest. She deserves honesty. He finally met Victoria's eyes. I love you too. I've been trying not to, trying to keep enough distance to protect myself if this falls apart. But it's not working. I love you, and that terrifies me, and I don't know how to reconcile those two things. You don't have to reconcile them. You just have to decide if the fear is worth missing out on what we could have together. What if I lose you? What if something happens, or you change your mind, or any of the 1,000 things that could go wrong actually go wrong? Victoria stepped closer, close enough to take his hands. Then you'll grieve, and Maya will grieve, and eventually you'll both heal because that's what people do. But Lucas, you're already losing time with me by holding back. Every day you spend protecting yourself from potential future pain is a day we could have spent actually building something real. Is that really the trade-off you want to make? He pulled her into his arms suddenly, fiercely, his face buried in her hair. I'm so scared, he admitted, the words muffled but clear enough. I'm so scared of losing you the way I lost Claire, of Maya losing someone else she loves, of taking this risk and having it destroy us. I know, I'm scared too, but I'm choosing to be scared and brave at the same time. I'm choosing to risk the pain because what we could have together is worth it. They stood there in the school parking lot holding each other until Lucas's phone buzzed with a reminder about an afternoon appointment at the garage. He pulled back reluctantly, his hands framing Victoria's face. The horse show tomorrow. Maya's counting on both of us being there. I'll be there. Front row, cheering loud enough to embarrass her. She'd love that. He kissed her forehead, gentle and full of promise. We need to have a real conversation soon, about what this looks like long term, about whether you're willing to actually move in with us instead of renting that cabin, about marriage and commitment and all the scary permanent things I've been avoiding thinking about. Whenever you're ready, Victoria said, I'm not going anywhere. The horse show the next day was held at Henderson Ranch, with the entire town turning out to support the young riders. Victoria arrived early, helping Margaret set up the arena and organize ribbons while Lucas and Maya got Dakota ready in the barn. The morning was perfect. Clear skies, warm sun, the kind of Colorado spring day that reminded people why they chose to live in the mountains despite the harsh winters. Maya was nervous but excited. Her braids perfect, thanks to Sarah Patterson's expert help. Her riding outfit borrowed from Emma, but fitting well enough. She rode in the youth beginner class, guiding Dakota through a series of simple patterns while judges watched and parents cheered from the sidelines. Victoria stood between Lucas and Sarah, her heart in her throat as Maya completed each element of the pattern. The girl was a natural rider, confident but not cocky, responsive to her horse's cues, clearly enjoying herself despite the competition pressure. When she finished her round and the judges awarded her a third-place ribbon, Maya's face lit up with pure joy. Did you see? She called out, riding over to where they stood. Did you see me do the serpentine? You were amazing, Victoria said honestly. That turn at the end was perfect. Dakota did most of the work. I just tried not to mess her up. Lucas helped Maya dismount, then lifted her into a hug that made the girl squeal with laughter. Third place in your first show. That's something to be proud of. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Absolutely. Ice cream is mandatory for celebrating achievements. They stayed for the rest of the show, watching other riders compete and chatting with neighbors who'd become friends over the past weeks. Victoria found herself being included naturally in conversations, no longer introduced as Lucas's friend from Denver, but just as Victoria, someone who belonged in this community. Margaret Henderson approached as they were preparing to leave, her sharp eyes assessing Victoria with the same scrutiny she'd shown that first community dinner. You're still here, the older woman observed. Thought you might have gotten bored with small-town life by now. Not even close to bored, Victoria replied. If anything, I'm more certain than ever that this is where I want to be. Lucas told me you restructured your whole company to make it work. That's not a small sacrifice. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was a choice. And it was the right one. Margaret nodded slowly, approval evident in her expression. Maya needs stability. That girl's been through enough upheaval for one childhood. If you're committed to being part of her life, you better mean it for the long haul. I mean it, Victoria said firmly. I'm not going anywhere. Good, because I'm getting attached to having you around, and I'm too old to keep adjusting to new people. Margaret softened slightly. You're good for them, both of them. Lucas has been stuck in grief for 3 years, and you've reminded him there's more to life than just surviving. That's worth something. Later at the ice cream shop, because apparently every significant moment in Pinewood ended with ice cream, Maya sat between Victoria and Lucas, swinging her legs and describing every detail of her ride with the enthusiasm of someone reliving the best experience of her life. And then Dakota saw that flower pot and wanted to investigate, but I told her to focus and she actually listened, and that's when we did the turn that the judge really liked. She paused to take a bite of her chocolate chip cookie dough cone. This was the best day ever. Can we do another show next month? If Mrs. Henderson has room for you, Lucas said. But remember, horse shows take a lot of practice and preparation. I know. I'll practice every day. Victoria can help me, right? Victoria smiled, feeling the weight of being included in future plans. I'd love to help you practice. And you'll come to the next show too? Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it. Maya nodded, satisfied, and returned her attention to her ice cream. But Lucas caught Victoria's eye, and she saw the question there. How long could she sustain this? How many horse shows and school events and daily commitments could she actually handle while running a company remotely? The answer was simple. However many it took. Because this, sitting in an ice cream shop with a man she loved, and a girl who was becoming like a daughter to her, was worth restructuring her entire life for. That evening, after they dropped Maya at Emma's house for yet another sleepover, Lucas drove Victoria back to her cabin, but didn't immediately leave when they arrived. Instead, he followed her inside, his expression serious enough that Victoria felt her pulse quicken. We need to have that conversation, he said, standing in her small living room like he wasn't quite sure whether he belonged there. About what this looks like going forward. Victoria sat on the couch, and after a moment Lucas joined her. They sat close but not touching, both aware that whatever was said next would define their future. I want you to move in with us, Lucas said without preamble. Not because it's practical or because Maya keeps asking, though both those things are true, but because I love you, and I want to wake up next to you every morning and build an actual life together instead of this in-between thing we've been doing. Victoria felt her heart race. That's a big step. I know. And I know I've been holding back, protecting myself, trying to keep enough distance to survive if this fell apart. But you were right. I'm already losing time with you by being scared, and I don't want to lose any more time. What about Maya? Have you talked to her about this? I mentioned the possibility. She asked if it meant you'd be there to help with homework every day and make sure I don't burn dinner. When I said yes, she said good, because Dad needs supervision. Lucas smiled despite the seriousness of the conversation. She's attached to you, Victoria. Maybe more attached than is wise given all the uncertainties. But she's also happy in a way she hasn't been since Claire died. You've given her something back that she lost. The sense of having a complete family again. I don't want to replace Claire. I can't replace Claire. You're not replacing anyone. You're creating something new. A different kind of family that honors what we had before while building what we have now. He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. I can't promise this will be easy. Small-town life has its challenges. Maya will have moments when she resents you just because she's a kid, and that's what kids do. And I'm probably going to have days when old grief resurfaces and makes me difficult to live with. And I'm going to have days when work is overwhelming, and I'm short-tempered and miss the simplicity of my old life, where everything was about business and nothing required this level of emotional investment, Victoria added. But we'll figure it out together. That's what people who love each other do. Lucas pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, and Victoria's breath caught. The box was made of wood, clearly handcrafted, the surface smooth and polished to a soft glow. I made this, he said, opening it to reveal a ring nestled inside. The ring, too. It's not fancy, just silver I worked myself, with a small diamond I've been saving for something that mattered. I made it in the garage late at night after Maya went to bed, trying to create something that would show you how serious I am about this. The ring was beautiful in its simplicity, a single small diamond set in a silver band etched with delicate mountain patterns. It was nothing like the expensive jewelry Victoria could afford to buy herself, but it was worth more because Lucas had made it with his own hands, had poured his intention and hope into every detail. I want to marry you, Lucas continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Not because it's what people expect, or because it makes legal sense, or for any practical reason. I want to marry you because I love you, and because I want to build a life with you that's permanent and real and chosen every single day. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling through them. Yes, absolutely yes. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like he'd somehow known her exact size despite never measuring. And then he was kissing her, urgent and tender and full of all the emotion he'd been holding back for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, Both breathless, Victoria laughed. Maya's going to be insufferable about this. She predicted this weeks ago. She told me you were the one the day after you helped her with homework, said you had staying power, which is apparently her highest compliment. Lucas tucked a strand of hair behind Victoria's ear. She also said that if I didn't marry you, she'd be very disappointed in my judgment. Smart kid. The smartest. And she's going to be even more excited than insufferable when we tell her. He paused, suddenly uncertain. Unless you want a long engagement? Time to make sure this is really what you want? I've never been more sure of anything, Victoria said firmly. But maybe we keep it simple. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. I don't need a big production. I just need you and Maya and the people who matter most. That sounds perfect. Lucas pulled her close, and they sat together on the couch, planning a future that looked nothing like what either of them had imagined 6 weeks ago, but everything they'd both been missing without knowing it. They married 3 weeks later in a ceremony held at Henderson Ranch, with the mountains as their backdrop and the entire town of Pinewood in attendance. Maya served as flower girl and maid of honor simultaneously, taking both roles with serious dedication. She wore a dress she'd picked out herself, covered in horses, naturally, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers she'd gathered that morning with Emma's help. Sarah Patterson had helped organize everything with the efficient competence of someone who'd planned dozens of community events. Margaret Henderson had insisted they use her ranch because no venue in town has better views, and had refused to accept any payment despite Victoria's repeated offers. The ceremony itself was simple: traditional vows spoken with absolute sincerity, rings exchanged, a kiss that made Maya yell, "Finally!" loud enough that everyone laughed. Marcus had flown in from Denver, representing Victoria's corporate life, but also genuinely supporting her choice. He'd taken Victoria aside before the ceremony started, concern evident on his face. "You're sure about this? Giving up everything you built for a life in a town most people have never heard of?" "I'm not giving up anything," Victoria had replied, adjusting her simple white dress, bought at a boutique in the next town over, elegant but practical for a ranch wedding. "I'm adding something infinitely more valuable to what I already have. The company's doing fine under distributed leadership. You're doing fine, and I'm finally doing fine too, for the first time in 15 years. You seem happy. Really happy. Not just successful happy." "I am happy. Turns out there's a difference." The reception was a potluck affair, with tables laden with casseroles and salads and desserts, the same chaotic abundance as that first community dinner Victoria had attended. But now, instead of being evaluated by suspicious neighbors, she was surrounded by friends genuinely celebrating her marriage. Jennifer from the library gave a toast about finding love in unexpected places. Margaret Henderson made a speech about stubborn people learning to accept help. And Maya stood on a chair and announced that she'd known all along Victoria and her dad were meant to be together, and everyone should remember that she was right about these things. As the sun set and someone started music playing and couples began dancing on the grass, Victoria found herself standing with Lucas at the edge of the gathering, watching their community celebrate around them. "Any regrets?" Lucas asked quietly. "Not a single one. You?" "Just that I wasted 3 years being scared when I could have been looking for you." He pulled her close, swaying gently to the music. "But we found each other eventually. That's what matters." Maya ran over, breathless and exhilarated from dancing. "Can I call you Mom now, or is that weird? Emma says I should ask first before just doing it." Victoria knelt down to Maya's level, her heart full to bursting. "You can call me whatever feels right to you. Mom, Victoria, anything in between. I'll answer to whatever you want." Maya considered this seriously. "I think Mom for regular stuff and Victoria when I'm mad at you. That way you'll know when you're in trouble." "That seems very fair," Victoria agreed, pulling Maya into a hug. Later, after the party had wound down and guests had gone home, and Maya had fallen asleep in the truck on the way back to what was now their shared house, Lucas and Victoria stood on the porch looking at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "I keep thinking about that night on the highway," Victoria said. "If my car hadn't broken down in that exact spot, if you hadn't driven past at that exact moment, if I hadn't recognized you, so many things had to align perfectly for this to happen." "Maybe it was fate," Lucas suggested. "Or maybe we just got lucky." Or maybe, Victoria said, leaning into his warmth, we got the second chance we both needed, and we were smart enough to take it. Inside the house, Maya slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that her family was complete. The company Victoria had built continued thriving under new leadership structures, proving that success didn't require sacrifice of everything else. And two people who'd helped each other 15 years apart had finally found their way to building something permanent together. The mountains stood eternal and unchanging in the darkness, witnessing another small human story of love and risk and choosing connection over safety. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make and work to do, and the ordinary challenges of blending lives and raising a child and maintaining both career and relationship. But tonight, standing on that porch with the man she loved and the daughter she'd gained, Victoria felt the deep rightness of choices made not from fear or obligation, but from genuine desire to build something real. She'd come to Pinewood chasing a memory and found a future instead, had walked away from corporate certainty to embrace the beautiful uncertainty of actual human connection, had learned that the things worth having were rarely the things that looked impressive from the outside, but rather the moments of profound simplicity that filled ordinary days with meaning. Lucas kissed the top of her head, a gesture of comfort and permanence. "Welcome home," he said quietly. And Victoria smiled because she finally understood what home actually meant. Not a place, or a position, or an accumulation of success, but this. People who chose to show up for each other day after day, building something lasting through patience and commitment and love. "Yeah," she said, her voice full of certainty and peace. "I'm home." And she was.